Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your patience. Just gone 2 o'clock UK, 3 o'clock in mainland Europe. So thanks very much for joining us on our Embassy Talks 2.0 Smart Sustainable Cities. Very good of you to join us. We think we've got a nice program for you this afternoon. I'm sure lots of you now in this last year of COVID and lockdown are well versed in webinars. So hopefully we've got, as I say, a nice panel and some good discussion on what are the most important topics in the built environment, not only in the UK but around Europe as well. So my name is Phil Ratcliffe. So good afternoon and welcome. I head up the Dresden Sommer office here in the UK. And it's very nice to see you all. Oh, I think we've lost some slides there. So we'll just do some quick introductions. And we're delighted. We work with our colleagues in Europe and also the embassies here in Berlin and in London. So I think we're just getting over a small technical glitch here. So I'll just go for it there. So this is me. Thank you very much. Here's our colleagues working tirelessly in the background. So we've got a nice program for you today, and we'll take you through it all afternoon. There we go. We're jumping around. I can take you through some of the first things. So first of all, as you would expect with something like this, we do have some housekeeping rules. So as we're finding, please keep your microphones turned off. That would be great. And also, I think what we'll find is the panels or our experts who are talking and during the sessions, they'll switch their cameras on, as I remember to do so when they're talking. So please keep your cameras off if you can. As I think we shared with you, the event will be recorded. And just be careful if you could just be aware of any background noise that you have. Please ask some questions. So please use the chat function to ask any questions. I'll be collating some because we will be doing a Q&A and we've got some breakout sessions later. And please raise your hand as well. So just the normal housekeeping rules, if you don't mind. And I think we'll share the links with the recording and the content after the event, as you would expect. So the format of the event, what we've got for you today, we've got some opening remarks, which we'll come on to in a minute. And then we've got 5 keynote speakers, which I think should be good hot topics for you. Each doing a 5-minute pitch to take you through, and then we'll have a Q&A with them. So I would encourage you, please think of some questions. All of these events are better with some interaction. So please put your questions in the chat function. We'll bring them together and hopefully get some good discussion going. What we then do in the chat function at the end of the Q&A panel, you'll find 3 links to 3 separate breakout sessions, each with a moderator. Would encourage you to go into those. Where we've worked on this before as the Embassy Talks is really the interaction is really helpful. So when you go into a breakout session, please go in with the aim to ask some questions, get a discussion going. And hopefully that's how then we support our moderators and get a good discussion and information flowing between the groups. At the end of the breakout sessions, we then come back together and each of the moderators will just feed back on their sort of views of their breakout session, some of the key themes, some of the key arguments, challenges or whatever, so that we hopefully bring it all to a wrap up this afternoon and hopefully provided you with not only some information, some insight, but also some meaningful discussion. So with that in mind, I'd like to hand us over to Robbie Bullock, who's just going to give us, who's Deputy Head of Mission, who's just going to give us some opening remarks. So if you're ready, Robbie, over to you, please.
Yep. Thank you much, Philip. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to open the second part of the German-British Embassy Talks on Smart Sustainable Cities, and just like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I think in the first workshop, which I also opened, we looked at from a more German angle on smart sustainable cities, whereas today we're going to shift this view to the UK with our partners, of course, Dresden Sommer and Imperial College in London. Last year, Imperial launched Transition to Zero Pollution, which was a flagship initiative of its new academic strategy. The interdisciplinary programme brings together the entire college to contribute research and innovation towards a sustainable zero pollution future. The initiative takes a holistic view. It goes beyond zero carbon to consider pollution in all its forms. Well, the whole area of future cities is, of course, very broad. It covers energy mobility, material sciences, architecture and design, smart cities, artificial intelligence, recycling, waste management, amongst others. And the global challenges of the future can only be solved if we're going to join forces. For this particular event, we're focused on two particular hot topics, and that's the circular economy and smart cities. We're interested in the way that we can make a whole city smarter. That's to say, how people can share information using smart technology about how to get from A to B, for example, taking a train, then a bus, and then walk. And I'm sure many of you, like me, already use that kind of technology when we're in big cities. But there's a lot of research also on connecting different modes of transport more effectively, and how a smart government can reach citizens and share information more effectively, while also keeping the confidence of those citizens as well. Cities across the world are approaching smart cities in slightly different ways, so it's even more important that we share the way that we are learning and our ideas, because that'll be a lot more effective if we are sharing those experiences. And an urban circular economy is one in which cities keep resources in use for as long as possible, extracting the maximum value from them while they're being used, and then recovering and regenerating products and materials again afterwards. The UK government's resource and waste strategy aims to eliminate waste of all kinds by 2050. Its circular economy package policy, also published last July, takes this commitment to keeping resources in use for as long as possible even further. And the EU and the UK have both set important frameworks for these collaborations in science and innovation at an international level. And there's significant things that we can learn about sustainable and resilient cities of the future, which we can share and explore. So again, joining forces will take these new approaches forward and make our societies and economies fit for the future. As I think I mentioned last time, the UK is very proud to be hosting the UN Climate Conference, COP26, in partnership with Italy this November in Glasgow. And this will be a key moment for global climate ambition. The Paris Agreement is a treaty between nation states, of course, but to make it a reality, we really need cities to get on board as well. Generating more than 80% of the world's GDP and 75% of emissions, action from cities is essential if countries are to meet their net zero commitments and build our collective resilience against changing climate. In cities around the world, there's already very inspiring work going on. So over 450 cities have already joined the Race to Zero, many of those in the UK and Germany. And this is a global UN-backed campaign to rally leadership from regions, businesses, cities, investors, and universities for climate ambition. So we would encourage all cities in Germany and the UK to demonstrate their own climate ambition by joining this Race to Zero. The more of us that do that, it will help to send a very strong signal ahead of COP26 in November and show that we can collectively reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. Finally, I just want to say a very big thank you once again to Dries and Sommer and to Imperial College London for co-organising this event. I wish you all a very interesting and productive afternoon on behalf of the British Embassy in Berlin. Thank you very much.
That's great, Robbie. Thank you very much. And thanks for your words of guidance and also inspiration. I think just coming on the back of World Earth Day, we've all got a lot to deliver. And to take on the theme of what Robbie was talking about, we've got a panel now of speakers and discussion that is one international and where we really want to collaborate and work. So what we've got for you for the next sort of 25 minutes are Simon, Hilary, Anna, Asif and Marco, and they're going to take us through individual subjects. At the start, they're going to introduce themselves, but also get really into depth of their own topics, as really we take that lead of how we can share information, what's going on across Europe, but also how we can all do our steps collectively. The built environment is one of a jigsaw of both skills and expertise. We all have to work together, and that's the theme for us here, working together to make a better future. So with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Simon, who's going to take us through our first of our panel of our expert talks. Over to you, Simon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Phil, for your introduction and the presentation. I'm very happy to get the possibility today to give you a short keynote about our project Quartier Heidestraße, right in the Berlin city center. My name is Simon Dietz-Felbinger. I'm one of the partners of Dres & Sommer and head of the residential sector. And I'm very in this project since 2015, when our client, the Taurecon, bought this from the German railway. And since then, we really put a lot of effort into developing this area as a positive example for a smart quarter in the center of Berlin. As you can see here, the area is right beside the Berlin Central Station. It's very good connected to the local traffic, but also to the airport. And it is near the government quarter and also not too far away from the British Embassy, I think. It's not a city, it's a quarter, but it's, I think, quite a big quarter with around 85,000 square meters of land and over 295,000 square meters of gross floor. Within these gross floor, there are very different usages, around 170,000 square meters office area, retail, gastronomy, hotel, and everything you need for the daily usage in around 30,000 square meter, and also nearly 950 residential apartments, from which more than 215 are for the social sector. When we started creating this area, we were thinking, okay, who do we want to attract with this area? And we came quite fast to the knowledge that this is not a quarter for a special peer user group, but this is shall be something for a lot of people, where people meet, where we try to put in the positive effects of the Berlin Kiez structure and put it into a new built area. So that was our goal, to create a living quarter with a campus character where everybody feels well and finds the right spot for him. The quarter is also part of the big development of the Berlin Senate, of the Europa City, which you see here, where a lot of other corporates are already in their spaces, and where also around 3,000 to 4,000 flats have been built in the last 5 years. So when you visit Berlin, sometimes you will see that every time when you get to the main station, this area looks quite differently to the time before. And our task was also to integrate this quarter into the Europa City, but also to integrate the Europa City into our quarter. As you can see here, the whole quarter is made of different buildings with different structures. The office areas are beside the railway and the streets, and the residential is in the center of the quarter. The retail and gastronomy areas are on the ground floor. I think it's very special and important to say that the developer, our client here, does not plan to sell the buildings after the development, but has a long-term business model and wants to keep the whole area, also the flats in his own property. That's also very important because of course, when you are developing something that you keep in your own, for your own, you are very interested also to develop something sustainable and resilient. We made, I think, 4 architectural competitions, also to get different angles and different views and different proposals. And in the end, there were like 5 different architects who are right now planning the buildings. And the concept was to create diversity in a holistic concept. So for us, when we started to develop the project, we were wondering what is our marketing claim, who do we want to attract? And as I said, as a result, we think the quarter is too big to attract a special user group. We want to build something where everyone feels with it. So that was our question afterwards, that we said, what can we do to make the quarter more livable? And that's why always the user was and is in the center of our thinking. Yeah? And we said, okay, what can we do different? And then we were thinking, okay, a quarter as a city is an ecosystem where different assets and people come together and want to connect. And we wanted to find the right mix between hardware, buildings, infrastructure, the software, business models, digitization, and also, I like to say, soulware, humans, culture, community, what the things that really make a place special. And so we were thinking, how can modern technology and help us to create these kind of emotions also for a place. And we just wanted to use the power of the digitization to raise the comfort and to reduce the costs and the administration efforts to make things better than they usually are. And that's why we created for this quarter a digital platform where everything, as you can see, the buildings, the users, the asset management, third parties, the city and the communities, the different corporates which are there are connected. And so that the services and offers can be booked easily. The daily process, or daily processes is entering in your space or in your flat, work automatically, and the business can be run more efficient, especially when you think on desk sharing issues or how to follow Corona rules. So that was the task, and how did we do it? Besides that, the platform is not the solution for everything. It's just kind of infrastructure, and for us was very difficult to also find the right and meaningful solutions. And so we were following an easy concept. First we asked why do we need to change something? What are our pain points and what are the pain points of our users? Then we asked what do we do? What do we need to find the right solution? And how can we implement the solution? And is the solution digital or is it perhaps analog easier to get the solution? And so we thought in very different layers of the quarter. First, the quarter itself. What can we do outdoors? What can we do in the mobility concept, sustainability concept? Then we looked at the buildings. And at the end, we also looked on the flats, on the office spaces, on the gastronomy, and wanted here to create a smart, ready environment so that all these areas can also be customized by the people who will use these spaces after finishing the buildings. What was one of the main challenges was how do we do that? What partners do we need? What solutions do we need? What systems? As there's no single a partner, player on the market who can propose this holistic solution. And that is why you always need the right partners and to collect a variety of partners together. So you find holistic solutions. That is not very easy. So we were working on this concept like around 2 or 3 years, and also started the digitization process parallel to the development of the building. Yeah, in the end, I'm very happy because the first of the 6 buildings has been opened at the beginning of the year, and we are just also experiencing the solutions we made, and we have, I think, very positive reactions to our solutions, but also, of course, a lot to improve, as this is also the first time I think we do something like this on a quarter in Germany. And I'm very happy to discuss further issues and to get your ideas in our breakout session. Thank you very much.
That's great, Simon, and thanks very much for sharing that. And again, I would encourage you all just to think about that topic. As Robbie said, we have to knit everything together. So whether it's for the Q&A session at the end of these talks, or whether it's the actual breakout sessions, please consider, I've already written down a few that I think I'd like to challenge Simon on as we get into the Q&A sessions. So yeah, please have those to hand, because I think it's going to be the discussion that's going to be the value, not just the slides from everyone. So thanks, Simon. So I'd next like to introduce you to Anna. Anna's from the Imperial College of London, and she's now going to take us through her topic. So good afternoon, Anna, and thank you very much.
I need to unmute myself as well. Thanks again for the invitation. My name is Anna Meach. I'm a senior lecturer in water systems integration in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and I'm also a co-director of the Center for Systems Engineering and Innovation. And in next 5 minutes, I will give you the, I guess, imperial and academic perspective. So I don't have any slides, I must admit. So this will be really kind of high level, and we can open some of these topics in the discussion. So what I would like to talk about is starting with the net zero as a question on how ambitious we want to be in tackling the climate change, and then again, what is the role of academic sector in driving and supporting social change, but also the innovation in the industry sector. And I would like to focus on this from 3 aspects. So I'm going to set the context. I'm going to be talking about the built environment and the infrastructure. And then lastly, I would like us just to talk about how we can achieve our ambition. So first, around the context, it has been mentioned at the beginning, Robbie mentioned the ambitious target of the UK government to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. I would like to argue there are 2 questions there. So first one is how we achieve the net zero carbon transition. And then the second one, which is linked to the imperial work, is are we, by focusing on carbon targets alone, possibly missing the opportunity to address the bigger challenge around the sustainable development? So from imperial perspective, the strategy on the transition to zero pollution has already been mentioned. And I think maybe what is worth mentioning in this context is that the strategy looks at the problem of the zero pollution from a couple of aspects. So from the aspect of technologies, economy, environmental health, water, food, energy nexus, and also the systems approach. And I think we can discuss how it all links with the theme for the day. And I think it's also worth mentioning that this is also aligned with the European Union Foresight Systems for the Environment program, where this year the program has a focus on addressing the delivery of a zero pollution ambition for the toxic-free environment by 2050. So very similar ambition from both countries, from the carbon, but also the pollution perspective. So with that in mind, my second point is around the role of built environment and infrastructure. And I would argue that its primary role, which is fundamentally enabling the high quality of life, it has changed because now infrastructure poses significant pressures on the natural environment, but also plays a role in the environmental management. And with my director hat for the Center for Systems Engineering and Innovation, how we see this challenge and how we see dealing with these challenges by placing the environment as an integral part of the infrastructure system. And we've seen that example in the previous presentation, where really development and planning decisions are informed not by socioeconomic indicators, but also the environmental indicators. So really putting the system on its head in a way. So we refer to this system as the zero pollution infrastructure. And what we would like to do with that is to really design the infrastructure systems that minimize environmental damage. And with that damage, we do include carbon, but also water and air pollution and the ecology and resources and materials extraction. And of course, we recognize that the system use, including the operational decisions, but also human behavior, plays a huge role in the complex system. So with that in mind, I would like to come to my final point, which is around linking the built and natural environment with people in a way that we have enough information to support our decisions, which I would argue is a very complex problem. And then coming to how we can achieve the zero pollution transitions. And I would argue that systems approaches can provide a way to do that. And when I say systems approaches, I mean starting with the mapping and identification of potential feedbacks and unintended consequences. And then also once we decide on the system and the boundaries, using the data and simulation tools to test the what-if scenarios, especially projecting it in the future. So we're talking about the climate change, but there's also uncertainty around our decisions. And then finally, having that information, how it can support collaborative decisions. And I think we already seen the value of the need for collaboration. So I will finish with just 2 examples around the need for systems thinking and systems approaches in these transitions. I guess we'll be talking a lot about the circular economy, and I do agree it's a very useful framework for technological innovation. However, what I would argue is that any solution should be designed in a way to ideally avoid unintended consequences, which could be either in the, for example, increased risk of new contaminants or, for example, increased system use. And just an example, for example, we do see issue of tire wear pollution, which has the impact of water quality and ecology, which remains even if we fully transition to electric vehicles to mitigate carbon. And we also, for example, see this rebound effect in increased water use, which is enabled by efficient appliances. So I think lots of things for us to think about. I would finish it here, Phil, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
That's great, and thank you very much. And I think you're bringing to light some of the things, how we're starting to bring this whole topic of linking what Simon was talking about into reality with you and people and materials, and also your topic around data, but using data to drive decisions, but also hopefully learning and changing. So thank you for that. And again, would encourage people to think about, some good topics of to ask Anna when we're into both the breakouts and the Q&A. So thank you very much. So now we move on to Hilary from the Department for Business, and I think you're going to take us through some of the things you've been looking at, Hilary. So over to you. Thank you very much. I think, Hilary, you're on mute if you can't tell already.
So, there's always someone. Today it's me. Apologies, everyone. Thank you very much for your introduction, Phil, and for your co-organisers for the webinar today. I'm the policy lead for the Horizon Europe Association team in BEIS, and today my presentation will cover what's meant by the UK's association to Horizon Europe. as this is a key vehicle to allow for collaborations across all things, but especially today on smart and sustainable cities. I'm just going to share my presentation. I'm afraid my technology is letting me down today. I may have to just talk you through it, but that's absolutely fine. There is nothing critical on the PowerPoint slides that I can't talk through. So in terms of our association, as part of the deal with the EU, we've reached an agreement to associate to Horizon Europe. This is a great outcome and allows us to build on the successful collaborations in the previous framework programmes. I'm happy to give a brief overview of Horizon Europe and what association means in a moment. Before I do, I just want to set it in the wider context. Research and innovation are inherently global, and international collaboration is associated with much more impactful research. Fostering an environment that supports this collaboration and brings together the best ideas from around the world is essential to this. The collaboration and open science in accelerating solutions. The collaborative relationships we have with European partners are key to all of this and are very important to us. And this is why our association to Horizon Europe is such an important piece of the puzzle. So, as part of the agreement between the UK and the EU, we have agreed that the UK will associate to a number of programmes, including Horizon Europe. Everything has been agreed in principle for the UK's participation in the programme, either under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement or the draft protocol that was published alongside it. It's important to emphasise there should be no more negotiations to be had with the EU on association. It's all been agreed. We expect the final steps to be concluded as soon as possible, particularly as the joint declaration published on Christmas Eve includes the intention for the UK to associate at the earliest opportunity. Senior Commission official Sidney Ratso, the Deputy DG for Research and Innovation, recently provided reassurance that it's their expectation that UK entities will be eligible to participate in the first calls. This has been confirmed by helpful advice published by the Commission on their website. The bottom line is that we're able to participate, and our message is to actively encourage researchers and businesses in the UK and their partners from across the EU to form consortia and prepare bids for the calls that will happen this year. So what does it mean for us to associate to Horizon Europe? The main things to understand are that the UK will be able to compete for funding on equal terms to other countries and other member states. In practice for researchers, this should not feel different to how they've interacted in the past. Grant bids from individual researchers or from consortia will be submitted in the usual way, and successful grants will be managed by the European Commission. The UK entities will be able to participate with partners from other countries across the full suite of Horizon Europe, including the Research Council, MSCA, missions, clusters and partnerships. There are two minor exceptions to this, which is the EIC Equity Fund and duly justified exclusions. So where have we got to? Well, the good news is the European Parliament approved the Horizon regulations and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement earlier this year. Earlier this week, and the next step is for the UK and the EU to confirm the protocol, and at the point the UK will be formally adopted. So where does that leave us? It's a great outcome. We want UK entities to take up the offer and participate. Our department's focus is to maximise possible engagements with the programme, working with the UKRI and devolved administrations and the sector at large to communicate opportunities within the programme. We've got fantastic national contact points here in the UK and in Germany that can signpost opportunities and help you put together bids. And I would particularly encourage you to look for opportunities within the climate neutral and smart cities mission, and in the clusters, particularly there's the Towards Zero Emissions Road Transport co-programme partnership, which is a follow-on from the European Green Vehicle Initiative under Horizon 2020. My main message is there are tremendous opportunities for funding and collaboration in the Horizon programme, especially around sustainability, competitiveness and productivity. And we fully encourage you to seek out those opportunities and make the most of them.
Hi, Hilary. Is that you done now?
Yes, sorry. I'm just
No, it's okay.
trying
It's
to
just
turn myself off, but my Teams is completely frozen.
Yeah, no, I think we've all done it. I think none of us are here sitting here with BBC quality anything. So yeah, don't worry. And I think just picking up on those points, thanks very much. And obviously, I think just starting already the theme of linking together from Simon and Anna, you talked about being able to researchers, and I'm sure Anna will be very interested in how researchers and academics can link into Project Horizon. And I think during the Q&A and certainly during the breakout, you'll probably be able to describe how we can get access to this and when it's available. So look, thank you very much for that. And yeah, we're all technology Luddites in some way, shape or form. And we can always blame Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. I don't really mind. So look, thanks very much. So on to our fourth, really, because as we can see, we could talk about the theory, we can look at academia. Simon's talked about how it's being put into action in Berlin as well. But obviously, sustainable design is really important. And I think I'd like to then bring us forward to Asif from Perkins and Will, who's going to take us through some of the sustainability aspects in design. So good afternoon, Asif, and welcome.
Hello. Everything working okay? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, absolutely. Very clear.
Fantastic. Okay. My name's Asif Din. I'm a Sustainability Director at Perkins and Will. I'm just going to run through effectively our journey in thinking beyond sustainability. And it's quite a few of the bits and pieces that Anna's picked up as well. So there's quite a lot of crossover there. So just start from here. So what do we do So this changes for each organization, but sort of like what is good in terms of how do we design a building? It's making things more sustainable, and it's a definition. Well, when you talk about sustainability, it's a definition of doing less bad. We need actually to think about the bigger picture to actually avoid those negative feedback loops. It can go forwards. Yes, it is. Right. So a system effectively is a range of different factors, and in terms of an ecosystem, we have to do the right thing at the right time. If we only think about zero in terms of zero carbon or zero energy, then we'll have to think about more of a positive impact on the rest of the pieces within the puzzle. Traditionally, when we talk about sustainability, we're only really talking about energy and water. And energy traditionally has been cheap. We should look at associated indicators in terms of energy as well, sort of like things that actually follow on from it in terms of the system. Particulates, greenhouse gas emissions, indoor air quality, natural ventilation. What are the other factors we need to actually look at to solve the problem without causing others? And it's not really about sustainability, because sustainability means that you are actually just thinking about one track to actually get the credits you actually want. A good example is the WELL standard. You can be focusing very hard on WELL and good environments, but in matter of fact, that might be opposed to energy or some other factors. So what do you actually have to look at? You actually have to look at the basic unit. The basic unit is effectively the person in the room. So starting off from there, it's looking at all of the different factors that are focused around that person and making sure that you build out properly. That's not to mean that it doesn't have to happen at scale. You have to think about a range of different scales that this can all be applicable to. And at the end of the day, we've got to measure stuff. We've got to actually show and demonstrate that we can actually do this. So it has to be a scientific output, and you have to have the correct key performance indicators to have in place. This actually means that you have to think about stuff and then think about what the follow-on is. Now, in terms of us as a business, we've actually focused this down to sustainability, resilience, regeneration, inclusion, and well-being. And for each one of those, effectively, we are looking at precedents that then become prototypes later on. So effectively, we're collecting those things as a palette of materials that then we can actually not reinvent the wheel and actually progress in what we're actually trying to do. So as you can see from the titles below, you know, sort of like this happens all of the time in natural systems. You have a period of time where we have sustainability, then we have a decline, a resilience moment, a regeneration, and then a period of sustainability again. This is a general pattern of life that we are just trying to replicate within our design process. And part of this is actually making sure that we work efficiently as a design team. It means that we have to use effectively good feedback loops, but also not think in silos, getting consultants in early and sorting problems out as early as possible. As we all know, effectively, the later and later you get onto it in a project or in a building project, the harder and harder it is to get things changed. So it's thinking about things in the big circles first and then making smaller circles later in terms of the feedback loop. And this allows us to actually do some process mapping, to actually look at what one thing will affect a range of other things within that process, and make sure that effectively we are thinking about where the weaknesses are, where all of the feedback loops are, and the what if scenarios to make sure that everything works correctly. Now, one of the tools within the box that we are being using quite considerably now is lifecycle analysis and lifecycle impact analysis. Now, used simply, that's effectively a single indicator. But in matter of fact, we're using it in more of an intelligent way and linking it to human toxicity to make sure what we're putting in is what you can get out, and also using the end of life cycle process to actually feed in the circular economy thinking and making sure how you can retain value and create those infinite loops of materials as you're going around the system. But it's something that we can't do alone. It's something that we need the rest of the supply chain to actually buy in with us. But as a front end, as a designer, we are trying to actually identify those problems early so that we can have all of those conversations with all of the players around the table to make sure that we can get a useful outcome out of it, out of the actual project. Thank you. I'll hand back to Phil.
Thank you, Asif. And I think one of the things that certainly I've learned over the last couple of years is where your statement about doing less bad, and is the bar high enough? And I think maybe that's a question I'll come back to you on in terms of you know, who's brave enough to go above the bar that's set certainly by the legislators and the government. So thank you for that. But it's a common theme. So we'll come back to you on that one in the Q&A, if that's okay. So finally, then, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Marco Abdallah, who's going to take us through the last of these expert sessions before we go on to into the Q&A panel and then the breakout session. So good afternoon, Marco, and over to you.
Thank you, Phil. I don't have a technical issue here, but I have a granny neighbor who loves R&B music and supplies me with some nice soundtracks. So I'm actually struggling with the slides. I have that sorted. Now you should be able to see my screen now. Sorry for the short introduction and a short interruption, and you should also be able to hear me now. Just let me know if that's not the case. It's a pleasure to have the last keynotes for today after those eye-opening presentations before. I now spent 10 years in the sustainability world in different countries, in Germany, in China. Now I'm based in London, and I can really see that in the past 2 to 3 years, we have a huge momentum on sustainability. One reason is probably that we start to realize that it is becoming actually a real threat not to act in a sustainable way. the World Economic Forum annually determines, therefore, the top 10 long-term risks, and it becomes very obvious that environmental risks here with the green dots, such as climate action, failure, biodiversity loss, natural disasters, are dominating. And I think the last one on the right side, infectious diseases, has shown us the very massive impact on our way of living if such a risk becomes reality. And we also see that the market has started to react. Investment is now driven very much by so-called ESG principles, environmental, social, and governmental strategies. And the key is really to have future-proof buildings, because a building is in the end an asset for the next 60 years or more, and climate targets such as the zero carbon target the UK set to the year 2050 appear to be very far away on the first view, but when you compare that and when you put that into relation to the lifetime of a building, it actually is affecting us right now, and it needs to be considered when we design the buildings today. And our construction sector has a huge ecological footprint. I think we all have seen already those numbers. The buildings are a main contributor to the crucial problems we currently have. Latest numbers show that our construction sector is responsible to 33% of carbon emissions, also responsible for around 40 to 50% of raw material consumption, and consequently in the United Kingdom, in 2018, construction was responsible for 60% of waste. Now, we did numerous carbon life cycle assessments across Europe to see how much buildings are contributing to climate change. And there is a very similar pattern which you normally detect, and it's that 40 to 65% of carbon emissions are operational carbon emissions related to the energy use in operation, the energy we use for heating, cooling, electricity for lighting, and so on. And the other half, 35 to 60%, is embodied carbon related to the materials. And that starts with the raw material sourcing at the very beginning, with the installation on site, repairs, replacements, but also the disposal at the end of the lifetime. Now, in that discussion about carbon emissions of buildings, we often discuss decarbonization of the electrical grid, which helps definitely to reduce the operational footprint over the next decades. The UK, I think, is here far more progressed than Germany. And the German, the carbon factor in the UK electrical grid is, I think, around 40% lower than the one in Germany. So it has an effect on operational carbon emissions in the future, but it has a very limited effect on the embodied carbon footprint, because we import materials from other countries, and embodied carbon is instantly emitted at day one when we do the construction. So we don't benefit here very much from a future decarbonization. So it's really something we have to address today. To achieve zero carbon targets or carbon neutrality, the so-called net zero principles have been introduced, which principally allows you to pay money to offset and compensate emissions of your project. It works not only for buildings, it works for flights, for everything. So now we even see a net zero carbon oil, which is achieved through offsetting, which actually does sound very wrong. And though the net zero principle, with this trade-off, it has its reasons. Originally was meant for carbon emissions, which cannot be avoided, but now it is used as the easy and very direct approach to zero carbon, also in construction projects. The majority of the net zero carbon buildings we see today are designed in a more or less same way as happened before. We talked about carbon. It was principally only switched to electricity, and most of those projects achieve carbon neutrality through compensation schemes. Because it is bloody cheap, the cost for carbon emissions is currently at 30 euro per ton. Now, if you do the math, it's the price for 1 pint of beer to compensate the annual operational carbon emissions for heating, cooling, and the building electricity for one work desk or one occupant in an office. While a good pint of beer, of course, can be tempting, especially in times of lockdown where pubs are closed, it's not really a game changer in decision making yet. Though looking on the graph, we see that there is a very sharp increase, so that might change in the midterm. Currently, the decision influencing factor is rather the future-proofing aspect, the fear, the risk aspect, which pushes boundaries. And we have tried to push boundaries for our own buildings, our headquarter campus in Germany, where we first made the decision to renovate and reuse existing buildings where it is possible instead of building new. And for example, our innovation center, which you see here, was established in a former industrial bookmaking factory, and that was turned into research office and innovation space. And after we have maxed out the renovation potential, we decided to design our new headquarter buildings as plus energy buildings, which have the potential to feed the remaining campus with an energy surplus the building produces. And therefore it's designed according to passive house principles to first reduce the energy demand to an absolute minimum. And then it has a geothermal energy plant, photovoltaic system on the roofs, and integrated in the facade where it makes sense, so that the building can produce electricity and feed the rest of the campus when there is a surplus. The main challenge we, however, found was not on the operational carbon side. I think technology to have plus energy buildings exists already since many, many years. It's just a lack of motivation. The real challenge, what we found, however, was on the material side and the associated embodied carbon challenge, the challenges with recyclability, how to avoid primary raw material sourcing in new constructions. And here we really see and feel that circular economy is the only straightforward way, and that it can be now implemented in a very efficient way when we use digital approaches. So develop tools where we can embed material performance and material information into a BIM model, what you see here on the screen. And that helps you to really visualize material performance. You can easily see where are the bad materials and the good materials, and that helps us and the design team to optimize all type of material performance indicators such as recyclability, pollutants, embodied carbon, and so on. So our mission is now to move away from the linear economy, the take, make, waste approach, which we see today, to a circular economy where materials are used in a smart way, which is basically following a closed loop approach. And this has so much potential and brings benefits to all stakeholders in the construction industry that we are very, very convinced after digitization, this will be the next revolution in our industry. Thank you very much. And I would like to hand back to you, Phil.
Thanks, Marco. And no new baby noises in the background, so well done there. And yeah, it's a great story, because I think in all five now we can see how we can go with Anna from research and what academia can do, with the direction from Hilary, which is what governments and countries can do, into then Marco and Asif's view, which is design, and then over to Simon, which then builds out and makes it a reality. So thank you very much. I'd like to encourage you to please ask some questions. We're going to go to a quick sort of 10-minute Q&A session with the panel. What I'll do, I'll try where possible to direct a question to an individual. And but what I may do is ask an open question, and I'd encourage one of you all just to pitch up. Actually, because he was the first to talk, he's probably had the longest rest. So I'm going to probably ask the first question to Simon, which is actually when we had the introduction from Robbie, he talked around obviously how governments and how countries are taking on the climate challenge, but then also encouraged us to think about how cities do it. But also you've taken it, and your project has taken it down to a quarter, so a particular area of the city. How is the Berlin approach and government and local government linking together what you're doing as part of their overall strategy for their city?
That's a very good and difficult question. But I have to say, in case of this project, we really had a lot of positive energy also from the Senate. The Europa City is a big development area, which was also brought by the Senate to the developers. It's an old railway area where before that there wasn't really anything interesting, and now there are a lot of developers. And the Quartier Heidestraße is the biggest area in this setup. So there was a lot of impact and input also by the Senate, by Regula Lüscher, who also encouraged us to do the architectural competitions. They were part of the development. We were doing the building area plan all together. And also Michael Müller, the mayor of Berlin, was there when we started with the construction, and also had a big discussion of what smart cities could do or should do for a sustainable environment. I think in a quarter, which is also private owned, you have more possibilities. You have a lot of possibilities also to try new things out. And so the Senate and the authorities were quite thankful that we also went forward and tried something new, and we have a very good contact, and also try, for example, on the local traffic, on a mobility concept, to put things together.
Phil, I think
you're on mute.
Schoolboy error, right? That was my best question as well. Actually, it was a question for Anna, because Anna, you talked around, obviously data-driven, etc. But first of all, where's your experience, and where can academia and commerce fit together? And they're linking in what Hilary was talking about, which is Horizon Europe, which looks at funding as well. What's your experience about how you can all work together for a better future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I guess from the academic perspective, I think there are two aspects, isn't it? So academia should push the boundaries in the way how things are done. So lots of things that can be explored maybe theoretically. Then the question is, do they work in practice? And I think this is something we do see more coming in the research is really working closely with the end users or the stakeholders. Either co-developing research, which we do more and more often, or really just taking theoretical concepts and then kind of testing them with the case studies and improving or reshaping so that they can be applied in the practice. Because I would argue, and what I mentioned in the presentation, I guess the problem of, say, decarbonization is a really complex problem. And I guess no one really has the answer at this stage. But I guess if we join the forces, we could try to get to the solution that, I guess, doesn't get into the trap of solving one problem, but create many more problems. And I think this is where I do see the focus of academia, at least from the Imperial side and the Center for Systems Engineering, is really try to understand how we improve things, and also how we don't make other things worse by focusing on maybe an issue which is highly interconnected with other parts of the system.
That's great, thank you. And so just linking that, we'll come back to something like that, Anna, in a minute. And there's a good question coming in, I think maybe for Asif, which is around humans being the basic block for sustainable systems. But obviously then is, how do we make sure that basically everyone's doing the right thing? I think the question here is, how do you prevent malicious actors from exploiting loopholes in the system for economic benefit? because there's going to be an awful lot of money flowing around, awful lot of incentives. And I don't know whoever thought carbon credits would be a thing years ago, and we create an economy around that. Any thoughts on that one, Nassif?
Well, it's an interesting one, and it's effectively trying to get the gamification out of it. I think it all comes down to effectively transparency, and we are trying quite hard in terms of our supply chain for them to be as transparent as possible with us. So in terms of our clients, we want them to actually issue, how much their design, how much carbon is in their design, but also in the supply chain, we're asking them for their ingredients. What are they actually putting in within their products? If we have that transparency across the board in terms of the data, then in matter of fact, then the system gets a lot more harder to gamify, and you'll get a lot less of those profiteering aspects to it.
Yeah, absolutely, but it's clearly going to be a challenge. And so less of the gamification, as it were, maybe less of that, but more than talking around the digital platforms. I think, Simon, you talked about that, and I think everyone's talked about the digital reality in terms of how can the digital design process be encouraged, and how can that really be made to be embedded to create a sustainable city? I don't know whether in your realities, Simon, but looking at you, Marco and Nassif, if you've got any particular guidance to how can that digital environment be encouraged?
Perhaps I can start. For me, it was a very important experience. It was not our first digital project that we did. It's the first quarter, but we had other buildings as the Cube in Berlin, and there we made a concept and without any tenants, and we said the concept is finished. And when the tenants came, of course, not every tenant had the same interests and the same usability for the things we put inside. So for us, it was important. As I said, we had different layers. We had to provide something on the outside, but we really wanted to be able to customize the flat, the office squares, exactly to the needs our tenants have, and that was for me one of the main different approaches than before.
Yeah, I think that's the point. I also thought to really have a focus on the user. The past smart buildings, the first generation was more a showcase of technology, where you try to put as many sensors in the buildings, and the building got smarter the higher the number of sensors was. And now I think there is a turnaround towards the benefit for the user. And we see that I think the Cube only has 4,000 sensor system compared to other buildings like the Edge who have 40,000. So it's the number of technology is actually going back with a stronger focus on the user. And I think this is the key to engage the human with the building and try to create a synergy for both.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in with both Simon and Marco. It's about the outcomes. Establish what the outcomes are and then use the technology to match, not the other way around, because otherwise you're just collecting data for the sake of it, thinking that maybe it'll be useful in the future. Phil, you're on mute again.
I'm very good at doing that, but I'm getting better now. So just in terms of thinking around how, I think, Anna, you mentioned around linking people with the natural environment, and also thinking around our experience the last year in terms of what COVID has done in terms of communities, where it's really put a strain on those. How do we link together, Anna? Are you aware of any research and how it links to the design and the development of creating communities that both benefit to, how we can, as people, interact with the built environment better?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are two aspects. So I think what Asif and Marco and Simon were talking about is designing for maximizing user experience. I think there's an interesting aspect about incentivizing certain type of behavior, because I think what we see from the infrastructure systems isn't the demand creates huge pressures on the environment. So I think that there's one link, and maybe just bringing back to use of the kind of digital and information. I think the information could be used to I guess, inform the behavior, but maybe also incentivize the behavior. I think there is a bit of danger. What if there is an information about the unsustainable behavior? Can we do anything about that? But I think it comes back to also the users, but also the operators, infrastructure operators. I think I would like us to bring the discussion about cities, buildings plus infrastructure. I think that's really important. I think on the second point, on the link between people and natural environment and COVID, I think we did see, so, green spaces, natural spaces within the cities have become significantly important. And I honestly deeply hope that we'll finally stop discussing, what are the benefits of the nature-based solutions. I think they have been obvious for quite a few years now. I think the question is, for me, more about, designing them in the way that they are really multifunctional, rather than, how much evidence we need to kind of show their performance. And then my third point is really around the role of infrastructure and kind of data, because infrastructure is, in my mind, something that goes in between the people and the natural environment. So my work is in water systems. So people don't think about water, isn't it? They turn on their tap and the water is there. They flush the toilet and the water disappears. So maybe using the information, not just about the kind of nearby environment, but also the wider system around how much, for example, we use water has the impact on catchment obstructions and the ecosystem services. I think we are missing an opportunity, and I think how much citizens would be interested in and possibly change their behavior if the information would be shared about, impacts on the environment from the different activities we do.
Great. Thank you, Anna. And so just breaking off slightly, we've got time for probably a couple more questions. Just one more that we see here, which is, if you look at, if we're sitting in a city in London or in Berlin, I know they've cropped up today, we can see, beautiful cities, and some of the schemes that some of you put on the screen already today, where we're building something new, from a digital platform up and creating it. And we looked at Asif's design, what Simon's doing in Berlin, and then what Marco's looking at in terms of cradle to cradle. But when you look at one of our cities, there's a lot of old stock. The city is there, some of it hundreds of years old. How do we take that old stock and really get it ready for the future? Is there a business case around that? Does there need to be one, or should we just be doing the right thing to get it ready for the future? Any thoughts from the panel on how do we do that?
If I can start, Phil, maybe just to say that I think that will be crucial for the sustainable development, especially, we've seen the numbers about the embodied carbon, and it's not just the carbon, it's other resources. We do have a lot of existing infrastructure, lots of existing buildings. We mentioned the COVID, and I think there was a question in the chat around the post-COVID world, how the world is changing because the way how we live and how we work, how we use, for example, the vast workspace now. Is there an opportunity there? And I would really encourage the maximizing of the retrofit of the buildings, and also really, coming to evaluating existing infrastructure systems and really trying to push the operational improvements before we do any construction, because there are things that, Marco was mentioning, technology exists, lots of technology exists which hasn't been implemented. And I think we should really think carefully and kind of really try to push for what we have, rather than going into, new developments straight away.
Thank you, Anna. And Asif, anything to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking about, in terms of cost benefit sort of analysis, in terms of doing a retrofit is always going to win, but it's hassle. It's hassle for everybody involved, the whole supply chain. And most of the time, it's easier to start off with a blank slate than starting off with an existing building, because you just don't know what you're going to find. If we can get over that hurdle using technology, digital surveying, other aspects, we can actually then, sort of like One Broadgate is a good example that Arabs have done recently. They looked at the facade, they did analysis on that facade, and then they just replaced the items that they needed to. And that was all done down to technology effectively. And it's going to be one thing that we can use within our toolbox as designers to make sure that we are retrofitting purposefully.
I think it's a really important approach, and I think we will not achieve the climate targets if we ignore that. There is so much embodied carbon, and the easiest way to avoid embodied carbon is to reuse the buildings we have. And if that's not possible, at least to reuse the materials and the parts if we need to demolish it. So we rather deconstruct it and reuse materials and thereby avoid the very energy intensive raw material sourcing process. And a very good example, I think, here is the World Trade Center in Brussels, where two towers have been fully renovated. And I think they limited the amount which went to the landfill to 5%. And 95% of the building has been reused or recycled. And I think that has a huge carbon impact, and I'm also pretty sure that in a couple of years we will see that also from a legal and regulation perspective, that you probably will only get a permit if you have a recycling strategy. And I think in London we have already the first start on that topic in the new London plan, which requires that you do a sustainability assessment and a circular economy assessment, and that you at least deal with that question, how to treat the existing building stock.
I think I'd go further than that, and I think effectively as designers, we have a responsibility effectively to design out waste completely. Waste should be, waste to landfill should be a historic component of how we design. At the absolute minimum, we should be just talking about designing for recyclability, 100% recyclability. And also energy to waste, waste to energy should also be completely eliminated. We have to be thinking about the material circularity a lot more seriously in how we specify buildings.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks to the panel. I think we've reached that time where questions were now starting to come, which is great. So first of all, to the four of you, I know Hillary's had to drop off, but to the four of you on the screen, thank you for doing that and presenting your thoughts and having the discussion. I know it's not always easy in these formats, but well done and thank you very much. What we'd now like to do is to take you into the breakout sessions. So we've got 3 breakout sessions, which our panel are going to go into, plus some other experts as well. You'll see them appear in the chat function. As you can see, there are 3: back to nature, resilient communities, and smart technologies. So what we'd encourage you to do is please click on one of the links and join that conversation. And then each one has a moderator. And I would encourage you, as we started to see in the chat function, the questions started coming. So please warm yourselves up. Think of some good, not only questions, but also discussions. I think it's a good half an hour to 40 minutes of good discussion. And then what my colleagues will do is towards the end of those, they will give a time warning. And then what we'll do is we'll come back for a wrap up so that we're done by 4 o'clock UK time, 5 o'clock CET. So please go and find the right one for you and think of some good questions and give the panelists a hard time, because I think it's quite nice to give them some hard questions. That's quite fun. So thanks, everyone. See you back in this session when we bring you back in about 30 to 40 minutes. Okay, thank you. So whilst everyone there, I think one of the healthy discussions was in the resilient communities room. So should we just start there, and who was moderating in there, and any good themes or topics or anything that would be interesting to everyone? So can I pass it over to that room to give us a summary, please?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. That would be me. So we had Asif and we had Professor Mike Cook with us, and then a few people joining us with the questions. So really lively discussion, I must admit. So few points that I would like to communicate back from that group. I think the first one we started, what was the key lesson from COVID linked to resilient communities, and the key message there is that I guess we've all learned that the value of the space and how people use the space may be a bit more locally than we normally do, and that probably may continue. I guess what we all agreed is that there is a need for all communities. So we talk about the equality issue. So all communities to have a need for the minimum level of amenity, something which I guess must be taken into account in any future design or retrofit. So our second then point was really looking at the design. And we talked about two things. We talked about the office space use, or how that will change now, and how the spaces could be redesigned, especially office spaces, for more residential and leisure use, and then how the balance between the kind of work, using space for work and using space for kind of other activities is kind of blended, but that there is also an opportunity for that to be created in a way that we have a good balance between the kind of compact design and very functional design to again provide these ecosystem services, kind of getting the feeling of the local community, which may kind of want to bring back people and not just leave the city. Then we talked about the incentives. There was a question around policy incentives. I think where we kind of agreed is that there is a more opportunity for maybe local governments to not maybe implement policy, but really kind of incentivize or nudge the sustainable development. And of course, we talked about the retrofit and enablers for the retrofit, including potential financial incentives, but also the data and information around the potential risk, for the existing building stock, and how that could be done, and investment in investigation, which currently doesn't exist. And finally, we discussed about the role of technology, both in providing that information around the existing building, but also the technology in a way of working with the communities so that they influence design, they see how these buildings could work, and also have it really as a kind of bottom-up design where we can almost simulate, not almost, but we can even simulate the use of space using something like agent-based modeling. So I think lots of positive outlook on the future, I must say, which I was really pleased about.
Thank you, Aaron. That's a great summary, and thank you very much. So I think your last point there links probably nicely into the second breakout of smart technologies. And Marco and Simon, I don't know who was in there, but is anyone able to take on the summary of smart technologies?
I will try. As we lost our moderator quite early in the discussion due to connection problems, that's also the disadvantage of the digital world. We had nevertheless a very good discussion, in my point of view, with Aruna and Robert. We discussed less about smart technologies, but more about it was more ethical discussion, how to get people to do the right thing, to act sustainable, and how perhaps smart technologies can help us with this. So we were discussing about misusing resources and how to incentive people to do the right thing, how to manage behavior and demands. And we were also discussing what the costs of new technologies are versus the benefit the technologies bring, especially when you look, for example, at Bitcoins and digital currencies, who need a lot of, have a big environmental impact. So for me, that was very interesting. Then I asked a question, and it was also asked in the plenum, how can you do it? How can you get these ideas? How can you manage behavior? And Robert said, you need social rules and guidelines, and you, for example, need these rules to personalize behavior, and to make also bad behavior visible, to others. And I think that is we still have to get one or two steps to get to this things, also due to privacy and legal issues. but yeah, probably it's the right way for the future to go. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon, for that. And nice wrap up in an emergency situation. So well done there. Thank you very much. And just in terms of the Back to Nature, I'm not sure about the participation in that room. Is there anyone who could just summarize anything on Back to Nature?
Yeah, I made it back to the plenum, Phil.
Well done. Thanks, Marco.
Yeah, I mean, we had a very short time for discussion, but I think we managed to touch at least on a couple of topics. We started our discussion on the topic coming back to nature from a technical world, which we established over the last decades with all the challenges, problems, and maybe limitations we have seen, for example, over-engineering, and that I think we all feel that there is a strong desire of humans, of peoples, also here in London, in the offices, to connect with nature, especially after the pandemic, I feel. And that brought us to the topic of biophilia, where we connect humans and nature in our building environment. I think Tilly made a really important point that we need to learn from biology and trying to, instead of inventing everything ourselves again. Especially for me as an engineer, I think this is a very strong message and very strong learning. And we need to bring back nature and insects into our cities, which we drove out in the last decades. If insects and animals feel well in London, we will feel well also, because we have functioning ecosystems and everyone benefits from it. We then touched on circular economy and the cradle-to-cradle approach, where we really try to combine a natural and a technical approach to create sustainable environments. And we have seen a presentation from Madaster, from Marlos, who showed insights into the Madaster platform, and that it's really a tool which enables and drives circular economy. And I think we all agree that this is the key also for a carbon neutral future, and one really important step for the UK as well to achieve the zero carbon target in 2050.
Perfect. Thank you, Marco. Well done. Nice wrap up. So we're at the end of our session now. So clearly there's a lot of joined upness that needs to happen there, both basic from central government, local government. I think Anna talked about that. Through design, through research. I think that came through Imperial as well, connecting not only products but people, and then using technology, not only technology in terms of the design, but also technology in terms of how we use it. Simon gave the good example of how they're implementing that in Berlin. So I'd just like to say, as we're now on time, thank you very much to our experts who gave up their time this afternoon. So Simon, Anna, Asif, Marco, and I know she's not here anymore, but Hilary, thank you very much for what you did. And thank you very much for stimulating the discussion. We will be sharing the link to the video, and I'd also encourage people to get in contact with any of the expert panel or anybody else you've met today. It's all about communication, discussion, sharing knowledge, and pushing us forward. So in that regard, thank you very much for joining. Thank you to our panel, and good luck with the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Phil. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.